everybody can hear me, yeah? Thank you, Al, and everybody for letting me speak here today. I'll do my best. I'm not the best in front of a big crowd, and this is a big crowd, but I'll do my best. Yeah, I've been around the Nipissing area, Huntsville area, Temiskaming area for about 15 years, so I kind of knowledgeable on the logging aspect in this part of the world. But I'm not an expert in biomass harvesting. We've been exposed to it for the last 3 to 4 months only, but we're moving into it more and more. So our presentation is going to be, I'm going to do this presentation, and then it's going to add a few words at the end. We made this presentation together. I'm going to start with what I see as far as volumes opportunities from the harvester side. Then we're going to talk about the benefits to a harvester or contractor, the constraint that we see or we fear, and the current trial that we're making in the forest, which is tour number 2 that Al talked about earlier, which I encourage everybody to come and see. So volume opportunities, the first one we see, and we see it everywhere in the forest for everybody who drives our road, it's the limbs piles at roadside. And it's already starting to be picked up now, and I think Mr. Steve from Sturgeon Fall Brush will talk about that, because it has been started in this forest, but it hasn't been recovered for years and years, and there's big piles like the first pictures we can see that could disappear and make the forest look better, and at the same time produce some economical benefits. We see it at about 10 to 15% of the roundwood volume that comes out of a clear-cut stand. Now, it's only on the clear-cut stand that we have those volumes, and the forest in this part of the world is not a clear-cut forest that much. It's maybe a third or 25% of the forest that goes into a clear-cut system. And the other volume opportunity, the big one, is the biomass that we leave everywhere in our partial harvest, the torrent hardwood and the pine forest. They're typically, like we see in the pictures, small pieces of branches and tops all over the cutover, everywhere in the skid trails. It's currently not allowed to skid full tree in those harvests for logging damage reasons. You do a partial harvest, you don't want to destroy everything, and those are fairly big crowns. So you would need an amendment to a forest management plan, an exception monitoring program in order to do a trial at full tree. There's a big amount of biomass available there. We estimate it that overall at 40%. 20% of it would be chip volume that could be recovered, and the other 20 is biomass, extra biomass volume that could be recovered. Those are numbers, very preliminary. We're doing a big trial, and we're going to get harder number on it. They're very different from what we saw on one of the first presenters, Mr. Moore. But one of the things I see in the forest is a lot of those trees that we skid full tree. Branches break, branches stay in the bush, a lot of them. So for sure we're never going to have the same numbers as the theory as to what is really recoverable. So delimbing at the stumps and bringing the limbs to the road, if we were to keep delimbing at the stumps all and topping at the stumps and bringing that separately to the road, we don't see it. If I talk about me or Dennis from Janvo, we don't see it as being economically feasible. We would be handling all kind of small pieces. Handling small pieces are very expensive. Maybe put a choker on every one of those limbs or whatever. We don't see it. So so it's either we find a solution for some sort of full tree, in our opinion, or we're going to have a very difficult time making this work. What could be the benefits to harvesters from biomass extraction? Would be to get some revenue or reduce some costs. If we could avoid piling of limbs or pile burning, that could reduce costs. We don't know if there's revenue available from biomass buyers or not, but we expect it could be. We could potentially recover more volume of chips. So that's, as I explained earlier. We could find a way to get rid of some unwanted species if we end up putting them in biomass because there's no market for them. And this forest is complicated with the number of species we have. So this could be a benefit, a serious benefit. And it will make the logging site look better. And it's an eyesore right now to leave all that on the ground. I forgot to move, eh? Sorry. The constraint that we see, some of it is cost, exception monitoring cost. If we go toward a full tree logging and partial harvest, we need to set up that exception monitoring system, which we're doing right now. There would be requirements for new, different piece of equipment. Grinders, chip vans, loading buckets to load the grindings, maybe a chipper. And as we know today, there's very, very little capital available for financing any new equipment purchase. And in the same token, there could be a requirement for equipment sale, and there's very little market for that too. So that's a serious issue for a contractor. The current system of micromanaging the patches or the blocks where currently a tree marker could change its tree marking to a different prescription every 2-3 hectares could make this very difficult to put in place. If we are allowed full tree in some sort of harvest, not full tree in some other sorts of harvest, and the blocks is a pizza of prescriptions, we wouldn't be able to implement necessarily full tree scaling. So that's a concern. The logistics also is another concern, especially in winter blocks, limited access time. So you would have to be, if you don't want to end up with a lot of extra road maintenance costs, snow removal and sanding, you would have to be really well aligned at the same time that the harvest and the delimbing is being done, that the biomass removal is being done as well. So that's the first part of my presentation. I'll talk about the trial that we're making right now a little bit. What kind of pushed us toward that trial is to find a different business model for our business today in today's economical environment. And as you can see here, this is kind of forcing everybody to rethink what they're doing and finding different solutions. And this is only the pulp market. The same graph is applicable to all the forest product today. So we absolutely need to look at things differently. A change in our traditional business model is required. So, and all the things that I'm going to talk about the trial here, they're not hard numbers yet. They're just feelings and mid-project report type numbers. So this is a traditional business model for, let's say, a tolerant hardwood operation. We start with the trees. We have a felling phase, a delimbing phase, a skidding phase, a slashing phase, then a loading and trucking phase. The truck would go to part of the wood would go to a sawmill. Big portion of it would go to our pulp mill. Unloading at the mill, a yard handling, so we have to feed the mill with some equipment. We chip the wood, and we end up the wood on a chip pile. So that's the traditional business model we've been using for at least the last 15 years that I've been around. If we go to the next slide, this is what we're trying to propose today in this trial. Start from the trees, fall the trees, skid the trees, chip them at roadside, and with a machine that will delimb the bark and chip, and bring the chip on the chip pile. So we bring, from the trees to the chip pile, there's 4 steps versus 9 in the other one. And obviously, there's a big impact on costs. So like I said, producing chips directly in the forest on the landings, it's a new way, a different way of harvesting. We don't delimb, we don't slash in the hardwood, and we integrate the biomass extraction to this because all the limbs are on the trees, it goes through the chipper, and they come on the side, all the bark comes on the side, so you get a big pile of biomass available at roadside. There's an exception monitoring program. We monitor the stalking after harvest. We monitor the damaged residual trees, and we also have a monitoring of the downwoody debris on the site. The site that we choose to do this is about a 20,000 cubic meter trial. It's 50% of the volume is in maple. There's also some white birch, yellow birch, and a little bit of spruce. The prescription's mostly shelter wood harvest. There's some section of clear cut as well. There's a good access to this sector. It's right on the main road, so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do it at that location. For a trial, it was important. We started this in August. So the controls we've put in place so far, well, first of all, daily supervision of what we're doing. We installed multi-dat with GPS in every piece of equipment, so we know where the trails are, where the equipment are, what the real-time, real cost of every phase. So we have also an automated daily download of multi-dat data. So that's very neat. It's a system where I have a little bit a suitcase in my pickup with an antenna, and it can download all the data of the machinery directly. I don't have to do any manual steps to get this. And we track machinery, production, and utilization, the quality of the chips. Those are all the controls that were put in place. This is an example of the kind of information we get from that multi-dat. This is the skidders in a specific patch, where they went. So this is important if we want to track our stalking, regeneration stalking result, is to make sure that we don't have too many skid trails. But this gives you an idea of the kind of information we're working with to make this work. So the mid-project report is that so far chipping has been difficult. We have a lot of downtime at the chipper. We're trying new things and a different machine a little bit, so it seems to be going in the right direction the last week. The chip quality has been good. That was one concern, is can we do chips, quality chips doing this? And so far the answer is yes. We see that extra chip volume coming from full tree so far, and I don't have the final number, but they look like 30% more volume per stem is coming out in chips. And then that's not talking about the biomass, which we're only starting to recover next week. We have piles of biomass, and we're bringing a grinder next week. We'll have the right number. Just highballing it, it looks like 30–35% of the chip volume is available in biomass. And the exception monitoring program is still underway. It's too early to know if the guidelines can be achieved or not at this point. We're still working on it. There's a large volume of biomass available, limbs and barks. So I encourage everybody to come and visit tomorrow if they're available. So that was my part of the presentation. Dennis wants to take a few minutes to talk more about his business.